Well, Rachel Arkell is from the Centre for Reproductive Research and Communication and led the research into the British Pregnancy Advisory Service's response to this. They said they were opposed to the National Institute of Health and Care Excellence plans that any alcohol consumption reported by a pregnant woman should be automatically transferred to her child's medical record. And she joins me now. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Oh, no, you're very welcome. Thank you for your time. So for people who haven't heard of fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, can you explain briefly what it is?
Yes, so it is a lifelong condition that is caused by alcohol consumption during pregnancy. So it's a spectrum disorder. It can range from FAS, so fetal alcohol syndrome, which is on the more extreme end, all the way down to neurodivergence and milder symptoms of developmental emotional regulation, those types of symptoms that I think are quite similar to disorders on the autistic spectrum disorder.
So it will be like a kind of an umbrella of as you said, a spectrum. They will, some people suffer from different aspects of it, or some people will live with different aspects of it. So why didn't we know about this like years ago? Was it just that kind of, it was always kind of, stay away from the alcohol, but I was being given glasses of Guinness when I was pregnant.
Yeah. So actually, FAS and then consequently FASD wasn't really talked about until the 70s. And it was observed basically by a group of researchers that saw common symptoms among children born from alcoholic women. So it sort of developed since then in the 70s of just a cluster of symptoms, signs that were common among children born from these women. And I think it's taken a long recognition over the years to sort of see the effects of alcohol, which is a known teratogen. So we know it's not disputed that alcohol causes harm in pregnancy, but what is disputed is the amount of alcohol that causes that harm, because obviously owing to ethical research and that sort of stuff, we don't know at what point that threshold for harm sort of happens. And so what we've seen since around 2016, I'd say in the UK, is a real push to include complete abstinence. Again, it's that precautionary principle of we don't know at what point harm is caused, so best not risk it at all, which for a public health message makes complete sense, because obviously everyone metabolizes alcohol in different ways. But it's over the last decade, I'd say, we're seeing a real push to sort of change that in policy and get people to act on it in new ways, particularly getting maternity services to act on it in new ways.
Now, there was a suggestion there from our health correspondent there that we heard from Michelle Roberts, saying that, if we do this, if we put the medical records actually on a child's medical records, a woman's drinking, we might get to the stage where we're starting to shame women. And if they have a problem with alcohol, they're not going to feel confident enough to say, listen, I have a problem here, because they're worried, aren't they?
Yes. And I mean, this was... you mentioned the Royal College of Midwives. This was something that we shared with them, that there is that real risk that if we approach women, particularly women who drink to excess and who have a real issue with substance use during pregnancy, if we approach them with this attitude of surveillance and critique and assessing reliability of what they're saying and this sort of stuff, does that foster a good, trusting relationship where women feel like they can confide in their healthcare providers? Because that is, that's what we should all be aiming for, is this open relationship, which I think ensures better care for both mother and baby. And we sort of know from the documents that NICE provided in their consultation process that, less than 3% of women are drinking to really harmful levels in pregnancy. We've got that from booking data. And our own research that the RISK project, for example, that was conducted at BPAS, we know that women really do like the precautionary principle and that they adopt it themselves when it comes to, cutting out or reducing behavior that could be risky in pregnancy. So with all of that in mind, we need to think about how we can foster foster healthcare that leads women to being honest with their healthcare providers. And and us at BPAS think this is the wrong way to go about it.
Why did the advisory body, the National Institute of Health and Care Excellence, think that this would be a good idea? What kind of reasons did they put forward for it?
So, I mean, the main justifications were to do with a cohort of children who, I mean, the main push to recording all information, the main push for that was to do with a cohort of children who have really been impacted by alcohol and who are no longer living with their birth family, right? So chances are that if someone has been drinking to excess during pregnancy, there are a lot of other things going on in their lives that mean that living, having their child in their home is maybe not going to happen. And so in order to ensure that those group of kids have that information about whether alcohol was consumed during their pregnancy, in order to access services and have a diagnosis of FASD, it was about, the rationale was equality of services, that this group wouldn't be left behind. And obviously that's completely, that is a laudable aim. That's really, really strong, but we shouldn't be pitting women against their children. That's the wrong way to think about it. We need to ensure that those children and family have that support, but that support shouldn't be stopped because there isn't the right information on a maternity record. And as you said, this type of approach might lead to women disengaging with services, concealing alcohol consumption, so that information might not even make it on the record anyways if they don't turn up to their appointments. So were people actually people who have been impacted by FASD, were they consulted in this? Because I would imagine they might have an opinion as to whose records the drinking should be recorded on. Well, it was quite interesting through the consultation process, because for those that know about it, it started way back in 2019, and obviously we've had major delays because of the COVID pandemic. So NICE actually ran 2 consultation periods. And in that first consultation period, the majority of stakeholders were all very involved with FASD support, diagnosis and care, and support groups such as NoFAS and, these people that have this lived experience. And what is interesting is that the majority of them wanted that information to be recorded because they've had their own experiences of trying to get their kids who they've adopted to get that information in order to get a diagnosis. And it's completely understandable, the amount of frustration and pain that these families have gone through in trying to get their kids support is horrible, but we need to figure out a way to ensure that kids can get that support and families can get that support that isn't dependent on, throwing away privacy and confidentiality rights of pregnant women. We need to be able to move forward and figure out the best way to do this. You were talking there about having an open relationship between pregnant women and healthcare providers, and that is really important, that a woman can speak her mind. But then, of course, people would suggest saying, well, a woman also has to take responsibility for the health of her pregnancy. And we have to make sure that, we're not lecturing women, but certainly there is a very strong advisory note of caution saying, don't be drinking or whatever. But if you think you're drinking to excess, talk to us. What do you think we ought to do? How do we fix this? How do we go about, making FASD more in the kind of public domain, and we talk about it more and kind of take away the shame and the stigma of it? I think that there's fundamentally a difference between enabling women to make their own choices, give them the information that they need, which does include the risk of alcohol use during pregnancy. But it needs to be done in a reassuring way. So at BPAS, we do get calls from women worrying about the amount of alcohol they've drunk before they've confirmed their pregnancy and questioning whether they should have a termination. The amount of anxiety that this causes women cannot be understated. So we need to enable an open dialogue that gives women the information they need to make informed decisions about their lives. And that needs to be protected rather than mandating how they should behave coming from, bodies like NICE, that we can't have a surveillance system that's mandated women and everyone, because, you know, that's our right to medical healthcare and medical decision making. You need to be free to do what you feel is best, regardless of whether someone thinks it's irrational or immoral or anything like that. You know, we need to protect that privacy and confidentiality, and freedom and autonomy for decision making. And that can only be done through information provision and trusting people to make their own decisions.
Okay, Rachel, thank you for your time today. It's been interesting talking to you. All right, take care. Rachel Arkell there from the Centre for Reproductive Research and Communication that led the research into the British Pregnancy Advisory Service's response. So what do you think?